The Tibetans by Michela and
Jarnae Williams.
Location. The Tibetans live on the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau. It extends to the Himalayas mountain range, the highest one in the world. Most Tibetans can be found in the Tibetan Autonomous Region. However, many others live in the Qinghai, Yansu, Sichuan, and Yunnan provinces. Southwest Tibet has a damp, mild climate. Northwest Tibet is quite barren, but its river valleys provide land for nomads to raise their cattle.
History. For at least 1,500 years, the nation of Tibet has had a complex relationship with its large and powerful neighbor to the east, China, or the PRC, People's Republic of China. The history of Tibet and China reveals that the relationship has not always been as one-sided as it now appears. Indeed, as with China's relations with the Mongols and the Japanese, the balance of power between China and Tibet has shifted between the centuries. Right now, China's main goal for Tibet is modernization, and this has been a cause of conflict between the two countries.
Environment. The Tibetan Plateau, dubbed the Third Pole, holds the largest store of water ice in the world, and it's the source of many Asia's rivers. It also happens to be the largest plateau in the world, called the roof of the world. The plateau holds the Hindu Kush Himalayan ice sheet, which is considered to be one of the largest ice masses in the world. For thousands of years, despite its cold environment, the Tibetan people occupied this plateau and created cultural landscapes based on the principles of simplicity and nonviolence that are in harmony with the environment. Guided by Buddhist beliefs in the interdependence of both non-living and living elements of the earth, Tibetans lived in harmony with nature. These beliefs are strengthened by the Tibetan Buddhist traditional adherence to the principle of self-contentment, that the environment should be used to fulfill one's need and not to fulfill one's greed. Tibet remained unfenced, its grasslands intact, its cold climate able to hold enormous amounts of organic carbon in the soil, which China wants to start using for products to sell among other minerals. Millions of Tibetan nomads moved from their traditional grasslands to urban settlements, opening their land for the extraction of resources and ending traditional agricultural practices, which have sustained and protected the Tibetan environment for centuries.
Environment and population. Tibetans are traditionally divided into groups according to their geographic origin, occupation, and also their social status. The plateau is divided into 5 general regions, each with a distinctive climate. The northern plain, which is mostly desolate, the southern belt of the Sango River, which is the heart of the agricultural activities, western Tibet, a mountainous and dry area, the southeast, which has rich temperature and subtropical forests and more rainfall, and the northeastern, which consists of rolling grasslands dotted with mountains and famous for its herding. Traditionally, settlement patterns were determined by region and by the 3 major occupations: peasant farming, nomadic herding, and monkhood. Peasants lived in the single dwellings as well as village clusters, whereas nomads lived in tents, camping both individually and in clusters as they followed their herds through seasonal migration patterns. Monks lived in monasteries of varying sizes, some reportedly with as many as 10,000 individuals. There are only 3 major urban centers, all located in the southern belt of the plateau. The non-nomadic society was also divided into hierarchical social groups ranging from the ruler and the noble elite to private landowners, peasants, and craftspersons. Since the incorporation of Tibet into the PRC after 1950, many Han Chinese have migrated onto the plateau, primarily to the urban centers where they now outnumber the ethnic Tibetan nomads who were originally settled into camps but have recently been allowed to resume transhumant patterns.
Population continued. The majority of Tibetans live on the Central Asian Plateau, bounded on the south by the Himalayas Mountains, on the west by the Karakoram, and on the east side by the Tangkula Mountains, and on the north side by the Kunlun Mountains and the Taklamakan Desert. This is a high mountain plateau of more than 3.9 million square kilometers, which averages 12,000 feet above sea level and has an extreme temperature fluctuations, and receives 46 centimeters or less of annual precipitation. However, a substantial number of Tibetans migrated from the plateau to Bhutan, Nepal, India, and other countries. There are currently several large reserves of Tibetans in India, some with as many as 5,000 inhabitants. Estimates of the Tibetan population are subject to dispute. The fighting in the 1950s over control of the plateau caused substantial human loss. The current Chinese figures for the total population of ethnic Tibetans within Chinese borders is 4.5 million, about half in the Tibet Autonomous Region, the rest in Qinghai, Gansu, Xinjiang, and Yunnan provinces. The Indian government has estimated the number of ethnic Tibetans currently in India at approximately 100,000.
Tibetan belongs to the Tibetan-Burmese branch of the Sino-Tibetan language family. It is also known as Bodish. There are two main Tibetan languages, Central Tibetan and also Western Tibetan. They also have many other regional dialects spoken throughout the plateau, the Himalayas, and parts of South Asia. Tibetan is monosyllabic with no constant clusters, 5 vowels, 26 consonants, and a blunt verb system. Tones and a subject-object-verb word order. The Tibetan script is a readaptation of a Northern Indian script devised for the first historical king around AD 630. Traditionally, the land was divided into Yusang, Amdo, and Kam, 3 dialect boundaries. The map below shows 2 of the divides in these boundaries, the Amdo and Kam. The area labeled as the Tibet is where Yusang is spoken.
Culture. The inhabitants in Tibet include Tibetans, Menpa, Luopa, Han Chinese, Hui, Sherpa, and a few Dang people. Among them, the Tibetans are the main inhabitants who take up more than 92% of the regional population. The Tibetan people are optimistic, bold, and uninhibited. Traditionally, farmers settled in small villages with barley as their main crop. Roaming nomads earn their living by herding yaks and sheep. Most Tibetans in cities today make a living as craftsmen. More and more people are migrating into businesses. However, their traditional lifestyles have not fully disappeared. Most people here are devout Buddhist, while only a few believe in the old Bon, Islam, and Catholicism, also having a few followers in Lhasa and Yangjing respectively. In this case, the land has grand temples and religious sites. The Jokheim Temple and the Sera Monastery are famous ones. Strolling on the street there, you can find many mani stones, colorful prayer flags, and people wheeling prayer wheels, all of which are important elements of local Buddhism. The locals enjoy some distinctive traditional entertainment activities like wrestling, tug of war, horse racing, and archery. There are also excellent singers and dancers, and there are also many ethnic festivals held every year. If you happen to be there on those days, you could join them to fully experience their unique and interesting customs. Here we're going to show a clip of several traditional dances that the Tibetan people have performed in a tent festival, which is held every year. The music of the Tibetans are similar to that of the Native American tribes in America, for their main instruments are drums and flutes.
Even though tensions have been really persistent and rising for years, it is only within the last 3,000 years that it has become at its most dangerous. The reasons being the PRC's control over the whole region's political and economic activities, all in the name of modernizing Tibet. However, this just has caused more and more violence between the two sects and caused many disruptions for the native inhabitants. Tibet has an economy which is historically based on agriculture and livestock. Due to the government planning has greatly increased the productivity of the Tibetan economy. In recent years, there have been advances made towards tourism, mining, and other businesses which provide construction materials. The Chinese government has developed plans to increase the productivity of the mining industry. Recently, in the highlands of Tibet, large deposits of minerals have been found, many which are vital to industry. Types of minerals such as aluminum, copper, iron, lithium, and others. These minerals were found near the Lhasa Railroad, which could provide for an easier access. With the plan set in motion for the development of the mining industry in Tibet, this province could provide for a positive increase in the Chinese economy. Tourism has been encouraged in recent years and has provided new jobs for the Tibetans. It has helped to relieve some of the overgrazing of the steppes of Tibet due to traditional herding. Also, the government of China has begun and continues to put funding into restoring Tibetan historical monuments and provide for new museums.
Thank you for listening to our presentation.